Try, or is it Trey? I keep forgetting to ask us sometimes whenever I have guests on. But is it just Try or Try? I keep forgetting.
Just try, like Triforce, it's the stupid internet handle I came up with when I was like 13 years old, and it just kind of stuck. So most people just call me Try, or at least most people who met me through the internet tend to call me Try, but Mark is also fine. I don't really care.
I like Try because I feel like Try has an uncanny ability to try again at games that are notoriously difficult. He has a lot of patience for that kind of
That's not really the original intent behind it, but I guess it has kind of worked its way into being that way.
for sure.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of times that when we've had people on before, they've always talked about, and I just hit my mic. And for anybody that's watching the new recording, we're finally using an actual pod mic now, because I used to record this with like a headset mic, so now it's a bit more professional quality.
Now
Uh,
it's real.
it's actually real, and that's what I've been trying to lean to. Now I gotta fix the camera later on. But most of the people that we've had on for recordings have always talked about trying to figure out what they want to go by as their alias whenever they're on Twitch or on YouTube making video content. Was that ever for you guys whenever you were coming up with the idea of My Life in Gaming? Was it always a hard choice to go by that name, or did y'all have something else figured out before then?
Well, it's kind of interesting because, I think when we started the channel, I had this idea of combining it into, like, in my mind, it was, very similar to the podcast, This American Life, where I wanted it to be, like interviews with people and, like stories. And it would be, essentially like them saying, like, this is my life in gaming. I think when we started it, it was not really like the idea was for it not to be like about us specifically, but it was like about other people. But the thing is that when you want to do something like that, sometimes you got to build up a body of work before people will talk to you about it. So it just became like us and like like our life in game, my life in gaming. But it's just kind of stuck, and like. I like the fact that people can, as Tri likes to say, like take ownership of the name, but also like we can too. And it's just, like it's just kind of like it's interesting because the channel has kind of, encompasses all this stuff from like things you do when you play games or things you use when you play games. And, so like other people can, like this is all the stuff that I need for my life in gaming.
Yeah, but there was, in terms of the specific wording, it did take a little bit to settle on it because it was always
Right.
My Life In, but like our email address is for whatever reason ended up being My Life in Video Games at gmail.com. That's never been fixed or changed. Like I wonder if someone if
So
we've
I
ever
think someone
emailed
had it
someone
already.
with that and people were like, oh, this seems like a fake account because it doesn't say My Life in Gaming. I don't know.
Yeah. But like even our Facebook page says My Life in Games. Like that was what it was.
Yeah.
Maybe that was what I think that was the first name that we were thinking of going with, but that one was taken. I couldn't create a YouTube channel with that name.
That's the other thing I was going to ask is that related to the channel itself. I know that the whole aspect of it is like as far as the quality of video, because I know that most people that usually go to your channel look at stuff like FPGA and even like the televisions and compare and contrast to them. Would you say that that's like a good example to showcase your video content off as, or would you say that it's like mostly all of the aspects of video gaming, including like compilations and other items like that?
Yeah, I mean, it was never really meant to be about tech or video quality or anything like that in particular. It was kind of, in fact, we didn't even necessarily intend for it to be retro focused at the time we started. I mean, I think the retro aspect kind of just kind of rose to the top naturally, just because, we like modern games. We still play modern games, but the retro is where our passion is, I guess. So it kind of just naturally became our focus. And then like almost a year into the channel was when we did our first kind of RGB focused video, and that was a big success. And I think people liked how we approached kind of explaining these topics that were generally things that were only talked about by like, in tech forums with techies talking to other techies. And we had like gone through this challenge of like kind of understanding like how we can utilize this higher quality video signals with original hardware. And we felt like we were able to kind of bring that information to the masses. People like us, people who are not like engineers or anything like that, but like we do have backgrounds in video production and stuff. So we like understood it. I always like to say that I've dumbed it down to my level. It's like, oh, like I've verified with like the tech people that this is correct information, but they are generally just explaining this stuff to other technical people. So it's like, oh, like I've like broken through in my understanding of how this works or how to hook this up or how to use these settings to get better results. And so we've kind of dumbed it down to, this level where people still think it's kind of technical, but it's not. It's just kind of this easier way of explaining like how can you utilize this and get better results.
Right. Because at the time, a lot of the stuff was just walls of text. And when you see this stuff like in motion and people are speaking it to you, then suddenly it's probably easier to wrap your head around.
And that's the other thing about those videos is that they're easy to follow, and especially with someone like myself who is still learning about how to upscale video quality. And I hadn't really found a good channel to do that. And I remember, this is like, a lot of people will not remember what I'm talking about, but there were TV channels like Tech TV, and they would always have these people come on and talking about like the best setup for like video gaming or like for PC. And there wasn't really anyone doing that type of quality. Was that kind of part of the inspiration for it, or were you just looking to do videos just based on like helping the quality of your videos out?
I mean, it was more just like we had kind of, learned about the FrameMeister, and it was kind of how we captured a lot of our video for the channel. And we just kind of, it was something we were very excited about. Like this whole RGB thing was new to us, and we just wanted to share in that excitement. And then when people seemed to clearly be interested in that subject, we kind of made it a major focus. Although, we've admittedly not done as many of those lately as people would probably like. But we're going to get back to it.
Yeah. And I mean, there's so many things to cover, and I attribute a lot of it to just being in the right place at the right time. There wasn't anything quite like what we were doing or like how we were presenting it at the time, and people responded to it in a way that we never expected. And it's pretty cool because, we get comments from people all the time saying like, oh, you helped me get into this. You totally changed how like I play games. And sometimes I think that's a good thing, or maybe it's a bad thing because they probably spend more time tinkering than actually playing games at this point. But, it's just been really cool to, hear people say that.
And that's good to be able to get anybody to just say thank you for helping us out, because that's the one thing that when, I forget which thrift store it was at, I think it was the Salvation Army, and I remember seeing like an old Sony PVM monitor that they were selling like in their like TV and appliance section. And the first thing I thought of was when you guys were talking about PVMs. And I just thought that was very coincidental, because a friend of mine also said the same thing. Is like, did you see the video last week where they were talking about that? And it's like, yeah, that's what I was just thinking of. But it's cool
did you buy it?
No, somebody already had reserved it, because when we went over there to look, they had the thing taped on, and
Yeah.
I think they bought it for $20.
Oh,
And that,
Yeah.
yeah.
almost.
And it's the same one where we found retro video games in their like glass display, but for whatever reason they never price it over like $5. So sometimes you would find like a Fire Emblem in there, or just something like a Fantasy Star, like a in complete clamshell case.
Yeah, I worked at a college TV station after graduating college, and I I saw PVMs and stuff. Most of the ones they had were broken at the time, actually. Um, but when we like cleared out a lot of the old analog equipment that we weren't using anymore, I mean, we were still using a lot of analog equipment, but there was a lot that we weren't using or wasn't broken. I took a lot of it home instead of just throwing it away because I thought it looked cool, and my home decor tends to be, video games and video equipment. Like it's it wouldn't fly in most homes, but that's what it's like in my house. And so I was like, oh, this stuff looks cool. I want to display it on shelves. And I had no idea at the time actually that these PVMs, one of which I had in my house for years. Again, it didn't work, but I had no idea people played video games on them. I mean, that obviously wasn't their intended purpose, but obviously there were communities of people on these forums who had been playing games on PVM since at least the 90s, probably people who, either worked at TV stations or maybe even in hospitals where it's like, oh, we've got these monitors in the back room, and if you use these cables on, it's like way more amazing than any other screen that you can play it on. I had no idea that existed, and here I had one of these monitors in my house. Again, it didn't work, but like I didn't know. I just had no idea that would become just like such a huge focus for me in a few years.
And
Yeah, I mean,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
I had a there in my office when I worked at a post house in New York City. There was a PVM 20L5 mounted in the wall, and I like had no idea that it was would go on to be so sought after. And it just the one that I have was thankfully secured before like prices were even like going up really all that much on them, and it was like on a trolley, not or like a dolly on the way to the garbage disposal or garbage dump in the back of a TV studio. And a friend called me and said, "Hey, these are headed for the trash. Do you want one?" I'm like, "Yeah, yeah." And then it sat in my attic for several months before I really hooked it up and realized like, oh, this thing does like 480p, it does 720p, it does 1080i. Like, I had no idea.
You had no idea you'd lucked into like one of the best models ever made. I mean, and it's crazy like what the prices have become, because I got my 20L5 from someone in California and actually shipped it to me, and it was like including shipping. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I think it was like $350 or so. It was under $400, and I just dropped it off for some repairs and refurbishing. That's going to cost more than it took me to get that modder shipped from California.
Yeah.
Because that's just like the cost of. I mean, if you were to buy a new one of those today, I mean, it would be a lot, especially if it had been refurbished.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, the cost of buying and maintaining these things has definitely gone up.
I would hate to be getting into it like without anything like right now. I just throw up my hands and be like, forget it.
Yeah.
I think that's the other thing about the hobby itself, is that it can get very pricey. And I know that both of you have video game collections, which I would assume that that's what's behind you right now. But as far as
These are
like,
books.
yeah, I know it's like all cardboard printouts and just shoved on the shelf just for display. That's all part of the hobby. You just look at it from like a distance, and it's like, man, I should be playing these right now. But since you brought up like a matter of cost, as far as like anything else gaming related, since you both are collectors, what would you say is the most surprising thing to come out of the hobby? Is it mostly just the software, or would you say that it's certain like console revisions, or would you say like it's a variant of a cover of a game?
Well, I mean, I think that the craziest thing that's happening right now is just how much of a renaissance is happening with like retro gaming tech. There's just like so much cool stuff like being released constantly, from like HDMI mods to like memory cards that you can hold thousands of memory cards on a single one. There's just so many things that there's something for everybody. Depending on whatever system you're into, somebody has made something cool, or people are just getting into making cool things for it, and it's pretty impressive the amount of stuff that's happening right now.
I mean, I think that really the most surprising thing is really the FPGA stuff, and that not just replicating like an entire console on FPGA. I think that's what a lot of people think of, like you have recreated the NES on FPGA, or the Sega Genesis on FPGA or whatever. But that has become the core of so many of these projects. A mod used to just be like, oh, I figured out if you use this like off the shelf video amp and connect these pins to these pins on the console with some wires, you can get RGB, or you can improve RGB or something like that. Now a mod is like a product that has had like years of development. Mods these days have companies, like people have actually formed companies, like small companies. I mean, it's not like, multi-million-dollar businesses or anything, but like people have actually been able to make a living developing these things. And they're using FPGAs to perform all of the scaling functionality and stuff. I mean, this is technology that's been around for years, but the way it's being utilized to improve retro gaming today is honestly just like, it's mind-boggling.
Yeah, especially the Mister, because I haven't messed with the Mister yet, and I know that I've got a buddy of mine who's been using that for a while. But would you say that that's like another piece of tech that came out of nowhere, or do you think that that's something that
Oh
was
yeah.
developed for a while?
I mean, that's like the main FPGA board used in that, the D10 Nano, is, it's used to train people how to use FPGAs. And, like it's partly subsidized by Intel, so that brings the cost way down. And that's what made, it's so accessible and so cost effective. And really, it's unfortunate right now because like the price of everything has just gone up so much that it's like twice the price as what it was before, which still makes it fairly accessible considering that you get this many platforms on it and you can do this much with it compared to like a singular system. But you look at something like the analog stuff, and a lot of those have like jailbreaks, so you can play like a lot of different systems on a single system. So it's similar, but it's just the thing with the Mister is just how much ongoing development is happening like on any given day. Like there's just like new things coming out all the time, so many moving parts, and it's definitely overwhelming. But once you kind of get a hold on it and you understand, that certain things might not be perfect, but there's people like working on it to make it perfect or basically perfect, and you take you play an active role in using it, and it's like really, really fun and just like amazing. It's just like, it constantly amazes me.
And something I think is kind of interesting about the development behind it is, even though it is an open source project and doesn't have like, the backing of a company with a lot of money or anything, a lot of the, really hardcore Mister developers have been able to use Patreon as a way to essentially allow them to dedicate more of their own time into developing these cores that people are so excited about, especially like on the arcade side and stuff like that. They're able to do so much more because of the enthusiasm the community has for this project. They're able to do that. I think a lot of people don't understand though is that they'll look at it and they'll be like, oh, like, I can also emulate GameCube and all of these. I can emulate PlayStation 3 on my computer. Like, why? Like, I don't understand the point of the Mister. And that's completely valid and understandable. But the way I've kind of come up with a bit of a canned response to when people ask, like, I just don't understand this. I say, like, this is emulating in hardware. This doesn't mean it's exactly the same as the original because, the developer, might have gotten something wrong or something, but it's usually very close. But what is like the original is the idea behind how it functions. With a software emulator, you're having to sort of send tasks through sequentially, and you're able to run tasks in parallel, just like you were able to do with the different chips inside original hardware. So if like the idea behind how it works is like, oh, like if that like sort of tickles something in your brain, like, ooh, like that's interesting to me how that works, then I think the Mister is exciting for you. If it's like, no, I just want to play the game and I don't have a problem with how these software emulators are set up, then that's fine too. And a lot of people do appreciate sort of the very visual sort of interfaces you can set up for organizing your games on emulator and stuff like that. That's going to excite some people, and the FPGA stuff is going to excite other people. People just have different areas of interest, and that's okay.
Yeah, I think the other part of it is, I know it's a term that's been thrown around a lot, but the casual market side. There's that side that just only cares about turning it on, which I think is kind of why Nintendo did the NES Classic and SNES Classic. It's pretty to look at, but some people usually just want that as like a viable option. As long as it plays the stuff for them, then they could really care less if there's like a difference on the visual side.
Exactly. And, several years ago, there was a family gathering for Thanksgiving at my parents' house, and I was thinking like, oh, I'll bring my Mister. But the Genesis Mini, or actually I have the Mega Drive Mini, had just come out. And I was like, you know what, though? The Mister is not going to be the right thing for that kind of like family gathering. Like, it's too complicated. Like, I thought my cousin's husband would be kind of interested because he really likes tech. And so, but then I thought, like, it's too complicated to like, because I actually had not used it a whole lot at that point myself, and so I was like kind of afraid like, oh, like things might not be set up correctly and I might not understand this or that. I thought, you know what, I'm going to bring the Mega Drive Mini. That's going to be like a much more accessible and fun thing for that kind of get together. And it was a big hit, I mean, my cousin's son, played Gunstar Heroes and Contra Hardcore, and he's like, oh, it's like Cuphead, So that, that was the right device for that crowd at that time in that context. Although I would like to show the Mister to them someday. I think they would have fun with it. But that was the right product for the right time, and there is a time and place for those little emulation boxes.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes people just get this idea. It's like, oh man, I really want to like play like Mega Man, the first Mega Man, and that was like the perfect opportunity to just go and get something that you can put on your TV with like zero setup and play it. And the Mister, like, it definitely takes, you gotta set a lot of stuff up ahead of time, and it takes a lot of like know-how. And one of the worst things, like one of the worst feelings when you're trying to show somebody like something cool is like when it doesn't work and you got to figure out what's wrong, like when they're just like sitting there waiting for it. And like with the Mister, like the potential for that is much greater than it would be for like a mini console.
Right. So like it's definitely not the right thing for everyone, but it is actually quite easy to use once you have it all set up. We were at Retro World Expo this past weekend, which is why I'm a little sick right now. And I was talking to this one guy who was saying, like, oh, I've got all of the analog consoles, but I was thinking about like, maybe should I sell them and get a Mister? And I said, well, how much does physical media matter to you? And he said, not at all. And I said, well, then get the Mister. I mean, you can see behind me, I do enjoy my physical games. I prefer to play, like when I'm playing for pleasure, like I'm like, I want to play through this game. I prefer to take that and either put it in my original system or put it in like a Super NT or Mega SG or something like that. I like to use my real cartridges. But for someone who doesn't care about that, I mean, Mister just has so much more potential for continued development. And that's and he was like, we were talking about whether it was, difficult to set up or anything. He's like, oh, well, I was thinking about setting up a server rack. I'm like, okay, if you're kind of the person that's thinking about like setting up a server rack and like all that kind of stuff, I'm like, you're not gonna have any problems making this thing work.
Yeah. And he said that you told him to come to me to see if I could, like I would basically reiterate the same thing as you said. But he's like, you told him to talk to me and see if I had any other counterpoints. And I was like, do you care about playing your actual cartridges? And he's like, nope. I'm like, there you go.
It's funny that you started talking about that, because I think that that's kind of where I'm at right now, because I've slowly been piecing out of like a lot of really big games. Like I sold a copy of Earthbound to a buddy of mine because I was just needing money for a car payment, and I just thought it's like, I'm okay with not having it physically, because as long as there is a viable, more reasonably cheap option for me to still play it while it still retains the high enough quality, then that to me is what I'm gonna probably choose over pretty much spending a couple $100s on one video game, because I know that it's tough for somebody to juggle through both like real life and then also being able to relax, but most of the time real life is gonna win out in the end.
Yeah, I mean, I like to own the cartridges because it motivates me to play the game. Like, it's like, okay, like this is on my shelf. I own this. It's on my backlog. I want to beat this. But if we hadn't just kind of held on to so many of our games for so long, it would have been a problem for sure. Getting started. We recently collaborated with John Linneman from Digital Foundry on a DF Retro episode. We've been friends with him forever, but we're going to start contributing more and more to DF Retro going forward. And we did an episode on Klonoa. Right now, it's still only available to their patron supporters. But I saw someone tweet to John with a screenshot that had his original copy of Klonoa 1, which is, a very expensive game. And they were like, they were almost like, they were asking this question almost as if there was some sort of movie magic going on. They're like, how did you do this shot? This game is $700. Like, showing the actual game. And he's like, I buy in 2000 for $15. Like, I mean, some people almost forget that, like, the prices of these things now.
Or
like,
they weren't even alive yet.
It wasn't always that way. Like, buying these when they were reasonably priced was an option at one point in history. And that's a lot of what's going on behind me. And, and sometimes I'll do things like, I'll pick up the Japanese version because it's cheaper than the American version or something like that. Klonoa is an example of that. Klonoa is very, very cheap in Japan, or at least it was when I got it. So,
yeah, it's just more motivating to play the games that you've like spent money on. But I wouldn't. To be completely truthful, like a lot of the stuff that we've bought is because we think, oh, is this going to be useful for like a future episode or a future video if we want, because we're really big on showing the real things if we can in our videos. We like to point a camera at it and shoot it, not show like a photograph or something like that. So we try to do that as much as we can, and we're just like, when we're like at a convention, it's like, oh, like maybe this is like a good price. Like I mentioned this in a script that I just wrote, and I want to be able to show this. So like I'll buy this. And there's a lot of stuff that we have, but not anything like, I feel like we don't have any like real stinkers in our collection. Like maybe it's a very curated collection.
Yeah. I mean, I've definitely bought a couple of things like as a joke, kind of, but not. I wouldn't spend a lot of money. I mean, I might spend $5 on like,
there's an intent behind it.
Yes.
Since you brought up like anything gaming related for that, I think one of the worst pickups, and this has become like a running gag for me and my friends because they know that I am not a fan of Renegade. I don't know if it's because the first level I always never beat, the subway part where there's these guys slowly coming in towards you and you try to attack them, but for some reason you're attacking behind you when you're supposed to be attacking in front of you. So that was one
Yeah,
of the things.
I want to like that game, but I actually either forgot or didn't know. I saw it at Retro World this past week. I saw the Turbo Graphics version of that. I'm like, oh, there's a Turbo Graphics version of that. I want to like that game though
Is
because
there?
it's one of the it's one of the first or the first Kunio-kun game. And
Oh yeah, yeah.
yeah.
But
Speaking of bad games, I mean, I don't know, this might be good. But I got at Retro World. I got Billy the Wizard Rocket Broomstick Racing because I recently discovered that we recently celebrated the 15th anniversary of the Backloggery, which is a backlog tracking website that a friend and I co-founded back in 2007. And we recently we had a celebration stream of the 15-year anniversary of the Backloggery, and I was looking up like what video games share a birthday with the Backloggery, and this game came out
That one.
this game came out the day the Backloggery launched. So I'm like, okay, I have to own this. It's too stupid and too cheap to not buy. So there you go. And that is, by the way, how Coury and I met. Coury was just a community member at the Backloggery, and we just got to be good friends from there.
And that's good, because that's the other thing that I think helps a dynamic whenever it comes to putting videos together, is that if you know the person you're working with, that it helps better than just somebody that you give like a script to that you've never talked to much, because I think it helps bounce ideas back and forth. And that's kind of why I wanted to jump into the channel as the next topic again. You guys have been starting it for My Life in Gaming since 2013. When you basically work on video topics, I know that we've already talked about like video quality as one of the big ones, but how tough is it at times for you guys to put a video together? Is it a easy decision, or do you usually have like a big list of topic ideas to basically make a video off of?
We have a big list of topics that I feel like we haven't looked at in years.
Yeah, you put together that
added
list
to.
like right when we started, and the last time I looked at it, it's like, oh, we've done like 10% of these. Like,
Yeah.
I remember one time a former coworker, we were talking about the channel. He's like, well, there's only so many retro video games out there, right? Like, aren't you going to like eventually run out of topics? And it's like, no.
Definitely
No.
not. Definitely
No,
not.
and that also, I think it would also be surprising to a lot of people that, hey, not only is retro is not dead, right? There's new developments, as we've been talking about, like with FPGA stuff. There's new developments happening in retro constantly. It's unbelievable. So
It goes back to that right place at the right time.
yeah, I mean, I think the right thing to do is to do a video subject when it's on your mind and you're excited about it. And the past several years we've been bad at that, I mean, which is probably part of the reason there's actually kind of been a major lull in content recently, is because we feel like we have all of these obligations. This like, oh, we got to finish this series, we got to do this video, and sometimes we lose sight of just being like, oh, you know what? Like, I want to do this video right now. I did that last year with a video on the Super Nintendo Super Scope. And that was like some of the most fun I'd had putting together a video in a long time. It was just because like I did that video at the time I really wanted to do it. And we need to, I think, do a better job on like capitalizing on our like current enthusiasm for a subject.
Yeah.
And just being like, I want to do this video now just because I want to,
Yeah, and that's the other thing with what I usually do on the side, aside from these recordings. I do video gaming history, not necessarily like gaming historian, but it's a lot of obscure gaming items of the past, like a GameStop Nintendo necklace chain that was like a part of a competition back in 2006. And it's always that one thing that I always go back to where I think about doing one video topic and it's kind of hard to balance out because you got a schedule that's already written out. Has there ever been a time for you guys that you've always had something being worked on, but then something else comes in front, like it's, yeah, we do need to jump on this?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
a lot. I mean, what did it recently happen with? Well, we needed to do this Mister video that we released earlier in the year before certain documentary projects came out. But what was it? Was it the Analog Pocket where we it was suddenly shipping and we knew we had to just switch
Right,
over.
we had
It
to
was the RetroTink 5X where you said it's we need to do this. Like
Right.
we were working on some other stuff and we needed to. It was very important for us to cover that
Yes.
right away. So we just dropped everything and switched over.
That was the other thing I was going to ask since you brought up the Analog Pocket. I don't really get why a lot of people are hating on that particular system because I think it honestly does what it pretty much is said to do. I know that there were certain things before the patch notes where they updated it to what was the thing that they featured recently?
The Open FPGA.
Yeah, that was the other thing. I know that that wasn't in there originally, but they were still working on it.
Right.
Whenever you guys get those type of sponsored videos, do you usually still feel the same way after you get it, or is it just mostly okay, I've had it for a while, but the honeymoon phase is kind of over, kind of thing?
Well, I mean, first of all, it's not a sponsored video. It's a review. Yes, we were sent review samples, but I mean, we're under no obligation to say nice things about it. I think a lot of people look at Analog is the only company really in the scene that really does the whole embargo thing, and so they always say okay, you can't release any reviews until this time on this day, and so there's always all of these Analog Pocket videos or whatever other product they've done releasing on the same time, and a lot of people will look at that and they're like, suspicious. But that's how video games, new release video games are. You're not allowed to release a video review or a video on this until Friday at 8 a.m. or whatever. So it's the same concept. We're just not as used to seeing it in the retro scene. But for those and I think this is something that maybe made some people suspicious is us and, our friends like John Linneman, who we were talking to during the review process, cause he was also doing his own review. There were some bugs with a few games that and flashcards, some flashcard, I don't remember if it was ever figured out
later
exactly.
revisions of a flash card.
Yeah, certain
Some
revisions of
didn't work.
flashcards had issues, but the ones we had did not. So there were some people once it got out into the hands of more customers, more bugs were found.
Mm-hmm.
But during the review process, I mean, everything was pretty perfect aside from a few missing features that we really wished had been implemented by then. But it's funny because I actually brought the Analog Pocket on a trip back in June or July. And that was the first time I ever actually played it purely for pleasure. I was like, you know what? I'm going there's some Game Boy games I want to play right now. I'm going to bring that instead of my Switch on this trip. And it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed using it in that context. But when I was working on the review, I was testing it out and playing games, but I don't really consider that playing games because you're testing, you're shooting B-roll, you're getting this material for a purpose. That's not really the same as playing a game.
Right.
So it was fun. I actually was like, you know what? I can see myself doing this again. I can see myself bringing this on a trip again to play some games on. So I do really like it. And then stuff like the RetroTink 5X, again, we did get review samples of that. But that thing, Mike Chi is just a powerhouse on just continuing to, he's been working on the RetroTink 4K and he's still cranking out crazy features on the 5X
backporting
all
some
the
of that
time.
stuff.
the menu system and everything like hardly resembles what we featured in our video because he just keeps going at it. I mean, it is. I mean that is not faking it to say that is just like the absolute best all around scaling device out there right now. Like, I mean, it is the complete package, and you know we use it kind of as the heart of our retro recording setups. So these are all products I'm still very enthusiastic about.
And we're kind of in a unique position that when we're like doing these videos on a product that hasn't come out yet, we can provide feedback. And there's been countless times where we've been able to provide feedback, and problems that we've run into were able to be fixed like before it got in like everybody's hands,
right,
which is really, really cool. Because we want to like and use the stuff that we cover. You know, we want them to be good.
Right, because if I do run into issues, and sometimes I do, like I would feature that issue in a video if it wasn't going to be fixed or couldn't be fixed. But like if it is going to be fixed by the time that like the product reaches customers' hands, then I don't want to just like call them out on that because like, oh, gotcha, you know.
Yeah.
I want it to be in a good state when the product comes out and when the video comes out. I want the video to represent the product as, you know, as you would get it, you know. And I know like Digital Foundry takes a very similar approach because like, for example, they delayed their Spider-Man PC coverage because major fixes came like with a day one patch, and they didn't want to be like, oh, here's all these problems with the thing. It's like not even like how you're going to be playing it. But we've definitely had times where that's been a major frustration where it's like, oh no, here's this like really bad issue, you know, please fix this. And we usually do get
because people are going to call them out on it once it gets in people's hands.
Exactly. And you know, and usually it is able to be fixed with these retro community products. You know, the opposite end of that, you know, I did back in the spring, I did a review of the LG OLED C2, which I ultimately exchanged for last year's C1 model because the C2 has a ton of issues, especially if you're into some of this weird retro gaming tech like the Mister or the RetroTink, where you want to play in some of these higher resolution modes. It has some lag issues with some of that stuff. So but the thing is, LG is like, I can complain about this stuff all day, and the engineers at LG are never going to hear about it. And if they did, like there's no way it would be a high priority to fix it. So I was like, well, I can't take the chance on this issue not being fixed. I'm going to exchange it for last year's model because I know last year's model does everything that I want to do the right way. Whereas with these products, there's usually a chance of the flaws being fixed, but like LG, like they're too big, you know.
The other thing I was going to ask about, you mentioned about like flashcards for the Analog Pocket, and I don't have it on me right now. It's over in the corner. But the one that I use is the Omega Flash, and I think I saw somebody's review on it before, and the cart itself has rumble added in, so if you have like a pinball game you're playing on, then it's like just shakes the Analog Pocket. Originally, when I was like messing around with it, it wouldn't work originally, and then I found that there was an update that somebody on a community web forum posted about. It's like, just put this in, update the Omega Flash, and it will work, and lo and behold, it did just that. And I think it was like after the last patched update for the Analog Pocket, ended up just making it play through just fine. So I don't know if anybody is out there that is having the same issue that I did before. There's help out there whenever people have any issues with those.
Yeah, we don't have any experience with that one.
There's always stuff like happening behind the scenes, and or just, you know, people are working on fixes for things, and it does get overwhelming. You know, like I try to update his devices unless he absolutely has to, but I like to update a lot, and you know, sometimes I feel like I just like spend entire days like updating stuff. Then you update. It's like,
I was working on my Mister yesterday, and that was like a rare thing. You were probably very proud of me when you saw those messages. Like, hey, you're actually like setting up and organizing your Mister and putting ROMs in the right place and stuff.
Yeah.
I'm normally just like, oh, I don't want to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I can't wait to do that kind of stuff. But then at the same time, I think recently I've started to feel like it's just like exhausting that there's like new things every day, and it's like, is it going to break anything? Is this, so I feel as though I'm slowly being able to like relate to how Try feels more and more, where I just like want things to work. And then, like I had an issue yesterday where I got one of these new Bluetooth wireless controller adapters for the PS1. And, it's just from Brook. Like I have like an older one. It's like on this kind of like a longer dongle, but it's like this one is just, it's a lot smaller. It's a little bit bigger than a memory card. And I was excited because it's supposed to be a little bit faster. And I try to make all my stuff wireless when I can. And so I bought this. And then for some reason, when I put it in my PS1 with an X station and a PS1 digital HDMI mod, like I wouldn't get any video. So I tweeted about it, and some people are saying like, oh, I wonder if it's just like drawing too much power for whatever reason. And someone replied to me and said, hey, this is working, and here's a screenshot of it working. And I saw in the picture that they had updated their PS1 digital to the 2.1.0 firmware, which came out on Friday. And I still was on the 2.0.1 firmware, which had come out a couple of weeks ago. And I updated to that, and it like worked. Everything was fine. I don't know why that happened, but it just like fixed whatever issue that I was having. And it's just one of those things, like I was joking yesterday because it happened like I was receiving a package, and it got delivered to the wrong house, and I didn't realize it, and I just thought that like it didn't get delivered here for whatever reason. And I tweeted about it, and then like suddenly my neighbor brought it over. And I'm like, maybe I should just like start tweeting about every like little problem I have, because then they like solve themselves within an hour.
I mean, talking about, sometimes you just want things to work. I mean, I think that is a big part of the appeal of retro hardware to me. And I think a lot of people forget how simple it actually is, because I saw some posts several months ago that just made me laugh. Because someone was saying like, wow, I've been buying new consoles since the Super Nintendo, and man, Microsoft really deserves some kudos for for their setup experience on the Xbox Series X, because it is bar none the best out of the box experience I've ever had. I turn it on and it's like, oh, do you want to set it up with your phone? And it's like, yes, of course I want to connect it to my phone and set it up via my phone. I want to set up every product like that. And it was updating so fast, and then I was logged in, and within minutes it was already downloading all of my games. And I'm thinking, dude, have you really been buying new consoles since the Super Nintendo? Because I'm pretty sure you just connect your Super Nintendo to the TV, put in the cartridge, and power it on, you're playing the game. There's no setup. There's no firmware update. There's no downloading your games. There's no using your phone to do anything. Like the CRT, you have it on the right channel, and the picture just appears. Like,
yes, and then you play it.
We have made things somewhat complicated with RGB mods and, dealing with so many different consoles running through switchers and needing kind of some specialty cables to get the best picture and everything. But at their core, these original systems and CRTs are so dumb and so simple. They're not trying to do anything that is extraneous or unnecessary. Like that's kind of part of the beauty of it. Like I like that simplicity a lot of the time. Sometimes I just want to pop a game in and it just works.
Because I think that some people have convinced themselves that, there was a time, like with the PS3 and the 360 generation where, you get a game on day one. There's like a chance that you might not even be able to play it that day. Like whether it's like a gigantic patch or if it has like a big install or something like that. Like you weren't going to come home, pop it in and play. Like you had to plan around it, and that has gotten a lot better. But I mean, like any of the Xbox One consoles, like still take forever to install, even a Series X. And then it's like half of that is like I got an impromptu 26 gigabyte patch for Halo Master Chief Collection yesterday. 26 gigs. I mean, you get that, and you're gonna if you go to the store and you get Master Chief Collection now, like just think about like you're not playing that day one, or you're not playing that day. Like that system's going to be on overnight, and like maybe even then you won't have a chance to play it the next day.
And I think a lot of people don't understand that a lot of games now are releasing actually in a very good state.
Yes.
And they're like, oh, well, the discs are useless, because they always got to be patched. And it's like, well, it's not as bad as things were, like, especially in, like you said, PS3 360 generation. It's not, games aren't launching in a broken state as often. So, but still, like, I think people, I mean, patches are such a weird thing because it's like, well, if patches weren't available, would companies release games in a more finished, complete, relatively bug-free state as they used to back in the day? It's hard to say if that option wasn't there, if they would be that much more careful, or if it's just the complexity of games today just makes that situation inevitable. I don't know, but still, I mean, I love just the purity of these old cartridges that you just plug them in and they are what they are and they just work.
Yeah, especially a lot of new companies, or not necessarily new companies, but there's companies that either re-release older titles. Actually, it's kind of hard for me to like show up on camera, but there's I still have the hardest time pronouncing that name.
I saw at least two people wearing that shirt at Retro World this weekend.
I saw some people. I mean, it tells how to pronounce it right on the. Right on
yeah,
the shirt.
it's kind of like hard to say. Gyrus.
Gyrus.
Like
yes.
R, like ARE, which I always thought it was Gyrus.
Oh yeah, but I mean that's a actual other game.
But yeah, back to what I was saying on the game releases. I know that there's companies that do brand new games, and then there's people that do like physical like ROM hacks. I've seen them at Korg's last year, or actually this past year. And there's like the neat idea of being able to get these games at a much more reasonable price, because my copy that I got, I think it was like 2 days ago, is over there, and I'm going to be playing it later tonight. But it's, I think it's just a lot easier to play the older stuff now than it is like more of the newer, because I've seen a lot of games get put on PC and the console as well. It's not just no longer about exclusivity, it's just a matter of like companies just wanting you to pay money to buy the product. Now, since we're back on like the topic of collecting, as far as like the future of gaming for you guys, do you see leaning towards more like for the newer releases on PC only, or do you see that if it has exclusivity on those consoles, would you still go for those?
We're
We
both
barely do like any PC gaming. Like
Yeah.
I mean, unless it's something you can't get any other way, then I mean we're almost I'd say that we're 99.99% console.
And I'd say a large part of that is because we are so entrenched in physical media at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, if you keep up with your PC, you could get the best version of a new game on PC. Generally, unless it's, I mean, nowadays that's really up in the air because like Unreal Engine has like a ton of issues on PC that are often circumvented on consoles. But no, we like physical media. We both have PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X, and we for now have tended to get more physical games for PlayStation 5 over Xbox Series X only because so many, or maybe even most, Xbox discs they're releasing now only have the Xbox One version game code on the disc. So they won't even let you play that on the new console without using smart delivery, which, okay, we're connected to the internet, whatever, but we're the kinds of people who overthink, like, what is our access to this game going to be like in 20 or 30 years, potentially. So the PlayStation 5 discs, aren't saddled by that. They are native PS5 versions on the disc. Sure, you pop it in, you won't necessarily have patches if you don't update it via the internet, but you do know at least there is a playable version of that game for, the future. I mean, it's John Linneman made actually a very good point on DF Direct several months ago, where I think a lot of people think like, oh, like a version on PC is forever. That is the best way to preserve a game. Why are you so into physical media? And John said, digital preservation is, I mean, this isn't exactly what he said, but the gist of it was like digital is a great way to preserve for everyone. But the physical is about me. This is about my access to this game. I'm concerned about my access. It's not that me having a physical disc preserves this for everyone. It is me. I want to be sure that I can play this game if I have a working system in however many years, which I think is a very good way to sort of explain why we're so into physical media. But there are examples of Xbox games that do have Series X code on the disc, and I do like to buy those when possible. But yeah, we're very entrenched in physical media right now, and I have kind of made peace with the idea that eventually physical media will probably mostly go away, at least on PlayStation and Xbox, and I think when that happens, like, I'm not going to say I will never play new games again. I'll probably play like the newest Resident Evil or whatever some of my favorite series are. But I've made peace with the idea that eventually the game industry will probably move in directions that I just don't really want to follow. And hey, look, I've got more than enough games still to play for the rest of my life already. Yeah. So I'm not that concerned about it. I've made peace with that. And when that day comes, it's kind of whatever.
We've recorded long enough to be able to get to the final subject of the recording, and that is for the 5 count. This is our little subject that we like to go over 5 different content creators, whether they be on YouTube, Twitch, or any other social media that posts up any video gaming content that you guys are watching right now that you feel people at home need to check out.
Try, you go ahead.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I'll go first because I don't watch nearly as much YouTube as Coury does. I am a very bad multitasker, and I feel like people who watch lots of YouTube are very good at just like turning on something in the background while they get other things done. And me, like, I'm just like completely consumed by it, and I like never get anything done. So like a lot of the content I watch is, admittedly like kind of our friends. So, you've got like Digital Foundry. I watch almost everything they release. We're good friends with them. GameSack, we're good friends with Joe. We love watching GameSack. Game Dave, his channel should be absolutely massive because he is like the best presenter. He could make anything interesting the way he presents and just his delivery. He is so good. There's also Retro RGB, of course. Which is, a massive source of, it's probably, especially if you watch like the weekly roundup that Bob does every week, that is probably the best overall amalgamation of retro gaming news that you can get. Like if you just want to know like what is new and retro, like that is probably your best source for it. Yeah, Retro RGB. Hey, Retro RGB, at least the website was around for longer than us. We learned a lot of our starting stuff from there. Yeah, absolutely. You should definitely check out because he tests out stuff in a different way. Sometimes he'll cover some of the same devices we do. He tests out stuff in a different way too. So his stuff is kind of a good complement to ours. And just like I say, that weekly podcast has such good information in it. And that's 4, I think. If I'm going to pick a 5th, I'll say, Unfortunately, I don't actually watch this, but since we were hanging out with them and they were such great people, one of our best friends in retro gaming is Artemio Urbina. He is the guy who created the 240p test suite, and he and some of his crew were actually able to attend Retro World Expo in Connecticut, all the way from Mexico City. And we spent a lot of time talking to them. They were such cool and nice guys. And they do put a lot of content out that anyone can understand, because he does this show called No Context Synth, where he just has the actual hardware playing game music for like hours on end. Sometimes it's like arcade machines or computer MIDI synthesizers, or sometimes just a Sega Genesis. But a lot of their content is also like talk show in Spanish, which I cannot understand, but I really appreciate what they do, and they are pretty much literal gods in the Spanish speaking YouTube community. So anyone who speaks Spanish, you should definitely check out Artemio's YouTube channel.
Excellent. So that's a couple of them that I've never heard of before. So I'll have to, after the recording, be able to check those two out.
So I'm gonna go. I have a list here, and I'll start. I have only two video game related channels that I'm gonna start with. First is probably one of my absolute favorite creators, and that is Tim Rogers. He does a great YouTube channel called Action Button, and he used to work for Kotaku, and he does like multi-hour deep dives in covering games, and he's just like the best writer, and he's just like has a super good sense of humor, and he's he just like plays it straight. I'm really big on people who play their humor straight, like they don't say, "Hey, I'm saying something funny now," like they just say it, and you don't quite miss it, or if you're not paying attention, you miss it. But Action Button is like one of my absolute favorite channels, and he just did it. He just did a 9-hour review of Cyberpunk.
Oh yeah.
And it's like it was split up into multiple pieces, and you could you choose which subject you want to jump to at the end of each one. And he tried to encourage you not to like watch them all, but you choose 3, and then like that's your experience. And last year he did a 6-hour video on Tokimeki Memorial.
That's the one I was thinking of, because I think the first video I saw of his was in recommendations, and that was the video on the side. And I just remember, like, it doesn't feel like it's a very long video, but it just felt like it was like maybe an hour long.
Yeah, and it's 6 hours long because it includes 2 complete playthroughs of the game, and like him just kind of like summarizing these playthroughs. I mean, so I guess they're not really complete playthroughs, but like just really, really good stuff. And the other YouTube or video game focused show that I want to mention is one that I was just catching up on the newest video today, and that's Pandemonium reviews every Sega Saturn game, and he just released a 3-hour long deep dive into the development of Virtua Cop. And previously he did a 3-hour video on the development of NBA Jam Tournament Edition on the Saturn, and before that Virtua Racing. Just really, really good info, and he speaks in such a way that he almost sounds like kind of like a sportscaster. Like it's just like with so much enthusiasm, and the way he like weaves the music in and out, it's so good. It's so good, and like I wish that I could write like him and Tim Rogers do. Although like I feel like they're writing their scripts have just got to take so long, but they're just so good at writing.
You've gotten better at writing to your strengths lately,
right?
Rather than trying to write like someone else, which is something that you had kind of done for a while, and that kind of had you spinning your wheels in some situations. You've gotten much better at embracing like, what do I want to say? What do I get excited about?
Yeah. And sometimes, like that's like technical information. Sometimes like I just kind of gloss over certain things. Okay. So in terms of like video game channels. I like probably like one of my favorite ones that I like favorite channel that I'm into right now is this channel by a guy named Pat Finnerty, which is he does this series called "What Makes This Song Stink," where he does these videos on songs and he's very musically technically minded, so he can break down these songs. He can hear them and he can start playing it like right away. And he hears like rhythms in the music and saying like, "Oh, this was like basically lifted from this other song," and it's just very, very funny. He's just like he'll like do like new songs. He'll do some old songs, but I mean he's only been at it for like about a year now, maybe a little bit over a year. But it's just really, really good. He just started a podcast and just like talks about like bad songs. It's pretty great. And he's probably like definitely my favorite like non-gaming channel right now. The other ones that I want to mention is when it comes to like film reviews, one of my favorites is the Cosmonaut Variety Hour, which is I think that I really got into him because like the way that he speaks like reminds me a lot of like a guy I used to work with like years ago when we worked at Electronics Boutique, where he's just he's very unassuming, but he'll like put these like zingers in there without you like catching it. He's very funny, and like every year he'll do these like entire series review. Like he did one where you like reviewed every single like Harry Potter movie or every single X-Men related movie, and it's pretty good. And in terms of like video making, my favorite channel is probably Gerald Undone, who does like technical deep dives into like cameras and just like lighting and stuff like that, like video codecs, like very, very good stuff. And I wish that I had his presentation skills, because he's just really good at speaking very clearly, kind of I guess off the cuff. And like I'll watch anything he does. Any of these people, I will watch anything that they put out.
I feel like we should toss in, because I was just thinking of like who else were we hanging out with over the weekend. I feel like we should throw in a sixth pick for Displaced Gamers.
Absolutely.
Who we were hanging out with him at the con this past weekend, and he does some really interesting technical breakdowns of
like coding and stuff
of games, especially NES games, which as you can tell by my shirt is probably my favorite console as well. But he did a video not that long ago that just blew me away, talking about the minus world in Mario 1, which is like such, on the surface you're thinking like, oh, that's such a mundane topic, everyone knows about the minus world. But what he did was he really broke down like the way the game actually works and why the minus world glitch happens, because of how the instructions that the game says, like scroll at this point, draw this item, draw that item, and the hidden things that kind of dictate that script as the game plays out. And he explained it in such a way that like even someone who is not a programmer like kind of walked away from it with an understanding of like, oh wow, like I feel like I understand how the game works like so much better now. It was really, really cool. And he does lots of stuff like that. He's a great guy.
Now, since you mentioned about them, are they the same person that did a video on, I think it was Resident Evil 8, and just showing like the way that they move around with Lady it's kind of hard to pronounce her name.
Dimitra.
Yes, I keep having a hard time saying it, but I remember that there was a video on their channel where they were talking about Resident Evil 8 and like the pattern of movements. Like if you go to this one corner where they didn't program it, she'll come chasing you and then just stop dead center and then just turn around and just start walking off. I don't know if it's that same channel or not.
I mean, it's similar. It's I mean, he only covers like older games, like NES games mostly. But I mean, it's
similar
like
concept.
Similar concept, yeah. And then like he'll find like these like little glitches and stuff like that, and he will see like what it would take to like fix them, and he'll like we'll code that in there. It's cool. Like I think we first met him because he asked us to provide Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past save files, and he took all those save files and combined them into one save file that, just has all of our games in one save file that we could put it back onto our cartridge or use with an emulator or something like that.
Right. So this was actually after the save file preservation episode you did, where you kind of almost put the idea in his head, I think, that what if... So he took my save, one save from my game, one save from Corey's game, one save from Joe Redifer's game, and actually was able to edit the code to combine all three of those saves into a singular save that could be put on a cartridge or a flash card. So it was really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, he comes up with all kinds of cool ideas like that.
Well, that's a bunch of new stuff that I gotta check out. It's just hard for me a lot of time when I interview people. They always bring up new names of channels, and a bunch of them they mention off that. It's just, okay, there's a few of them I recognize, but these other ones, not so much. I just gotta find time out of making video content to go and check those stuff out. But
it's hard to keep up because there's just a lot of stuff.
Yeah,
to keep track of these days.
Yeah, that's really true. So, I know we were trying to keep this under wraps about an hour, but we ended up knocking about 13 extra minutes in the recording, but that's the thing I love about doing these. So, thank you again, Try, and also Corey, for coming on for the recording. I didn't expect either one of you to contact me for wanting to do one of these.
Hey, why not? I mean, absolutely. Thanks for having us.
Oh, it's not a problem, and hopefully everybody at home checks out My Life in Gaming. My Life in Gaming. It's been a long day, but yeah, they're one of my favorite channels, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people who are watching this already know who you guys are. But anything else you guys want to mention about before the end of the recording? Any hidden projects you hadn't mentioned about yet?
I don't know.
No,
actual videos coming out soon.
Well, we are.
I'm saying there is
things,
actual videos gonna happen soon.
It's been a little while, but we are working on things.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's a good enough way to end it. So thank you guys very much for coming on for the recording. It was a pleasure to have you both on.
Yeah. Thank you.